speak to us about faith and the use of money, and this shouldn't come as any surprise. According to Eugene Grimm in his book, Money and Faith, A Search for Enough, money is one of the most common subjects in the entire Bible. Jesus speaks about it frequently. Over half of the parables refer to money and possessions. 1 of every 7 verses in Matthew, Mark, and Luke deals with money and or possessions. In the Bible, there are 500 references to prayer, slightly fewer than 500 dealing with faith, but more than 2,000 verses dealing with money and possessions. So clearly the use of money, either as an idol to which we bow down, or as a gift with which to bless others, is an important topic in the Scriptures. Aside from a few excellent financial advisors that we have in our congregation, I think many of us are uncomfortable talking about money, especially in a faith context. Yet our world, and in many ways our lives, are dominated by money and the myth of money. Whether you have a little or a lot, it can shape the way you think about yourself and inspire anxiety or guilt or generosity, and sometimes all of the above at the same time. Gets that confused, for us. In Scarcity, the great Lai Lin Twist writes, whether we live in resource-poor circumstances or resource-rich ones, even if we're loaded with more money or goods than we could possibly dream of wanting or needing, we live with scarcity as an underlying assumption. It is an unquestioned, sometimes even unspoken, defining condition of life in our society. The idea that there is never enough. In the midst of scarcity, she writes, our relationship with money is an expression of fear, a fear that drives us in an endless and unfulfilling chase for more, or into compromises that promise a way out of the chase. In the chase or in the compromises, we often abandon our soul and grow more and more distanced from our core values and highest commitments. We find ourselves trapped in a cycle of disconnection and dissatisfaction. We start to believe the profit-driven commercial and cultural messages that suggest money can buy happiness. Intuitively, we know it's not so, but the money culture shouts down the wise inner voice. Today's readings speak directly to the power of this myth, the anxiety it provokes, and the temptation to let those things dictate our lives and our sense of value. Jesus is very blunt. No one can serve 2 masters. You cannot serve both God and wealth. The reading from 1 Timothy affirms the same idea, but a little more nuanced. Those who want to be rich fall into temptation and are trapped by many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. The key words in these 2 passages are serve and love. Money is a thing, an economic tool, which can be used for good or ill, but it's not something we are meant to serve or worship or love. Back in 2006, a long time ago now, the humorist Dave Barry wrote, why is money valuable anyway? Why are people so willing to work so hard for it, cheat for it, go to prison for it, fight for it, kill for it, give up their children for it, even marry Donald Trump for it? 2006, pretty political. I mean, look at the dollar bill, he said. What is it really? It's a piece of paper. What's more, it's a piece of paper that appears to have been designed by a disturbed individual. On one side, you have a bad picture of George Washington, and on the other side, why is there a picture of a pyramid hovered over by a giant eyeball? Instead of a structure traditionally associated with the fundamental values of the United States of America, like a Walmart. So how do we keep this thing in balance in our lives rather than serving it or worshiping it? I'm probably the last person you ought to listen to on this topic, because for most of my life, for many years, I was so deeply uncomfortable with money that I tried to avoid thinking about it as much as possible. Which is probably why many years ago, shortly around the time I was in college, I was wanted by the sheriff in Manteo, North Carolina for accidentally bouncing a check and leaving town. So that's a story for another day. However, if you see authorities coming into that, signal me if you see them coming. Might be. But it's slowly over the years, And more recently, with lots of help from Deborah, who's much better with this kind of thing than I am, I came to see that the less intentional I was with my money, the more power it had over me. So here are a few practical thoughts about how to break the grip of the power of gold in our lives. First, practice awareness. Dare to become aware of the financial reality in your life, whatever that might be, rather than let it vaguely hover over everything you do. Make a budget and be realistic. Try hard not to spend more than you have. Blow up the myth that something has to cost money to be good or to make you happy. Instead, put in practice the truth that many, if not most, if not all of the things that can give you real joy don't cost money. Time with friends and loved ones, reading a book, sharing a simple meal, playing music, taking a walk, or riding a bike. So because the things that give you joy don't cost money, it's okay to look at what you actually have in the bank and then live accordingly with that in mind. Second, practice generosity. One of the best ways to break down the myth of money and the power that money can have over your life and your psyche is to give it away. The myth says that money is what gives your life value and makes you happy. For those who live below the poverty level or close to it, and for those who are facing hard times, living between jobs or facing huge medical bills, student loans, and so on, there's some truth to this idea that having more will make your life better. When you don't have enough to get by with your basic needs, a little more money can go a long way to relieving stress and making life better, right? We've all been there at different points in our lives. But for most of us, the myth of money leads to a never-ending, ever-escalating promise that if we just had 10% more or 20% more income, then we would be really happy. That's the spinning wheel. To break the grip of this myth on you, practice generosity. Give away some money and discover how good that feels, giving it away. Much better than earning it or banking it or even spending it. And third, practice being intentional in your use of money. Break down the mythology of our culture which makes money a god which rules over you, and practice the reality that your money is a tool which you can use in any number of good, life-giving ways. So again, make a budget or come up with a practice that allows you to distinguish between the money you need to pay your bills, the money you want to save for the future, the money you want to spend, the money you want to give away to bless others, and the money you want to spend on entertainment, whether that's going to a movie or paying for a streaming service, buying a book, whatever it might be. Breaking the power of money over our lives means being intentional about all four of these categories. It means being realistic about the bills we need to pay, downsizing if necessary to make them manageable. It means being practical about the future. Yes, you are young and healthy and beautiful, or you still think you are young and healthy and beautiful. But either way, you won't always be. And in our society right now, one important form of self-care is saving for the future in ways that are practical and realistic and don't have to be over the top. Breaking the power of money over our lives also means practicing generosity in a very intentional way. In general, in our society, giving money away is a radical act. Yes, you might get some tax credit for it, but everything around us and even within us in this society screams, hold on to your money. For God's sake, at all costs, even the cost of your soul. Hold on to your money. So giving it away, the quickest way to break this power over us and the endless cycle of striving that goes with it is to give money away as joyfully and extravagantly as you can afford to do it. And sometimes more than you think you can afford to do it. One form of intentional giving is charity, giving your change to a stranger who asked, donating to provide food for the hungry, to help victims of disaster, which we're going to offer an opportunity for that later in the service. To support things like the Church of the Savior Benevolence Fund, which helps people in need with the cost of utilities, rent, medical expenses, and so on. You can be intentional about giving away your change, even, to strangers, by picking some amount to put in your car or purse or pocket each day to give away to the first people who ask for it or who need it. It struck me writing this that I want to start doing this more intentionally, and maybe I'll start with $2 a day that I put in my car or something, because there's that whole idea that many people in the world live on $2 and only have $2 a day to live on. So that's one little marker that I might use. And we know that money given to strangers is not always used well, and there are often better ways to give, and we should pay attention to that. But part of the power of money over us is the way that it dictates to us who deserves to be given money and who doesn't. Having some amount you just give away intentionally, yet freely, to anyone who asks or who needs it, whether it's somebody on the street, or the person in front of you in the grocery line, needs a little change or something like that, really breaks that down. Who am I to judge whether that person deserves it or not, which is why Jesus probably told his followers, give to everyone who begs from you. It's a challenge to consider. Another form of intentional giving is supporting efforts and organizations that work for good in the world, whether in the form of meeting some deep need, or by advocating for peace, economic justice, human rights, care for the earth, or some other social change. Again, being intentional about this is the key to breaking the power of money over our lives. When you take the time to look at your resources and intentionally dedicate some portion of them to give away each month to promote spiritual values or make the world a better place, you use your money as a tool to serve God rather than the other way around, living like you're merely a tool that serves money. This is what the old idea of the 10% tithe was all about. It was a spiritual practice to dedicate a certain portion of your income to the church or the synagogue. And this is also what pledged giving to this church is all about. It allows us at the church to plan a budget, but it also allows each of us to be intentional in our giving to something we care about and that we're part of. In the old days, the church or the synagogue was one of the few options you had to do something charitable. Today, of course, there are many options, from things like community shares to all of the different second-mile gifts that we support here at this church and many other great organizations in the world. The key thing and the joyful thing is to take a little time to be intentional about what and where and how much you want to give. For as Jesus said more than once, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. When we take control of our money in this way, recognizing it as both a gift from God and a tool to be used to address needs, bless others, and enjoy life, we begin to experience less paralyzing guilt and fear and more freedom and joy in our lives, no matter where we are on the economic spectrum. In a statement on just and whole living, the United Methodist Church declared, as I said at the beginning of the service, God's vision of abundant living is a world where we live out of a theology of enough, a theology rooted in the knowledge that our sense of value and self-esteem grows from a Christ-centered life, rather than from money or any other external measure. That's what these practices are about. Today's other readings from Jeremiah and Amos provide striking images or illustrations of different ways to handle money. In Amos, we hear God's warning to those who are so in love with money that they will engage in deceit to hoard it, even when their actions defraud others to the point of extreme indebtedness. The passage makes it clear that this is both unjust in God's eyes and a distortion of human personality, a distortion of God's intention for our lives. Then in Jeremiah, we are given this very different, very beautiful picture, sitting in prison in the middle of a city about to be destroyed, without even knowing whether his life will continue. Jeremiah uses what money he has to buy some land that will soon be conquered by the Babylonians. It's not even going to be Judean land shortly. It's a crazy thing to do, except that he does it as a public act of faith, that a time is coming when God's people will return to the land, and houses and fields and vineyards shall again be bought and sold in the land. Jeremiah uses his money, gives his money away essentially as a sign of hope for the future of his people. In Radical Gratitude, Mary Jo Leddy writes, the personal or political decision to declare that there is not enough is the beginning of social cruelty, war, and violence on a petty or a vast scale. On the other hand, the choice to affirm that there is enough for all is the beginning of social community, peace, and justice. To assume there is enough, to believe there is enough, frees the imagination to think of new